Moments. Good morning and welcome. We are in AP English, and our objective today now is to be working with Hamlet. We will be in Hamlet 1:3 to begin with, and possibly move on to Hamlet 1:4-5, depending on how well we get through 1:3. I want to begin by first of all reminding you that in Hamlet 1:2 we have for the first time presented for us the problems of Hamlet's life. Namely, he's stuck inside of a stepson, stepdad situation. He's not pleased with that, but break my heart, for I must hold my tongue. And then notice the scene will finish with, foul deeds will rise, though all the earth overwhelm them to men's eyes. That is to say, something is not right. We then will open 1:3 with the continuation of introducing primary characters. Let's list them for your notes. We are going to meet three important characters in 1:3. We will meet first Laertes, who is the son of Polonius. Now let's get Polonius out of the way real quickly. Polonius is the old fart of our play. Go ahead and make an observation for yourself, and you will see this in your study of the other Shakespeare plays that you're reading and viewing. Shakespeare loves to give some of his best lines to his fools and his children. He loves to have clowns and fools speak really important lines. You'll see this in King Lear, for example. And he often will have his children speak really important stuff. You might make a note that, for example, when you hit Macbeth 4:2, the child in that scene will make observations that are profound. And as you study that play, you'll see it. In this play, the fool of the play is Polonius. He's old. He likes to talk on a lot, like chatter, chatter, chatter. He speaks, but often there's not a lot there, okay? Polonius is the king's, Claudius's, closest counselor. That's important that you would note that. Our 1:3, however, doesn't open with Polonius. It opens with Laertes speaking to his younger sister, Ophelia. Now, when performances of this play happen today, I think I've said this to you already, Ophelia, it is important that she is a physically beautiful woman. All right? That's important for what happens in Hamlet 3, when Hamlet and Ophelia kind of get together and have their little conversation about beauty and truth. But at this point, it's an older brother. And what is it that older brothers love to say to younger sisters when the topic of guys comes up? Right. They will always say, you've got to be careful. We will begin 1:3 with Laertes making an observation about Hamlet. Notice what he will say, do not sleep before I hear from you, Laertes will say. Ophelia will say, of course. By the way, we should point out, it's pretty clear that Laertes and Ophelia, brother and sister, they have a pretty close relationship. So they can kind of banter back and forth. But now Laertes will say at line 5, for Hamlet and the trifling of his favor, hold it a fashion, a toy in blood, a violet in the youth of primy nature. Notice we're back to this garden and flower theme again. Forward, not permanent, sweet, not lasting, the perfume and suppliance of a minute no more. In other words, put it in your own words. What does older brother say to sister, to little baby sister about Hamlet? Danger, danger, danger. Men are dangerous. Older brothers are always good at giving this kind of advice to younger sisters and to say, let me tell you one thing I know about boys, and especially about Hamlet, bad. Ophelia will respond by saying, what? No more so than so? What? What are you talking about? Laertes will say, yeah, you cannot think of Hamlet more than that. For nature crescent does not grow alone in thaws and bulk, but as the temple waxes, the inward service of the mind and soul grows wide withal. Perhaps he loves you now. You can kind of predict where this is going, right? Perhaps he loves you now, and now no soil nor cotterel doth besmirch the virtue of his will. We're continuing with this garden theme, obviously. But you must fear his greatness weighed, his will is not his own. For he himself is subject to his birth. He may not, as unvalued persons do, carve for himself. Can you tell me what this means? And by the way, what Laertes is saying here is true. What does he say about Hamlet? That's really important. Not only is he a guy, and basically Laertes is saying, what about guys? Guys are basically what? Interested in one thing, Laertes says to his baby sister, guys are only interested in one thing. He wants to sleep with you, then he'll ruin you, and then blah, blah, blah. But wait a minute, he's making another point. What is this about Hamlet is not like unvalued. He cannot carve for himself. Do you have any sense what this means?
He doesn't value himself.
No. No. This has to do with the political position of Hamlet.
So he's locked into...
By virtue of being a prince, right, he doesn't get to choose for himself. In other words, guys who were born as the son of a king, they couldn't go out and find their own girlfriend and marry them. That was nowhere in the rules. The rules are daddy decides in arranged marriages that are always involved in politics. In other words, what Laertes is telling his sister is absolutely true. Hamlet can't just fall in love with you and marry you. He's going to have to go with it, whatever it is that his dad, and now it's his stepdad, will have to say, take it easy. It's interesting that Ophelia will say back to her brother, look, I'm not the one about to go to Paris. Don't lecture me about sleeping around and being crazy. You're the one about to go to Paris. So you might want to, she will say it this way, do not, as some ungracious pastors do, show me the steep and thorny way to heaven, whilst like a puffed and reckless libertine himself the primrose path of dalliance treads, and recks not his own reed. In other words, we harken back to our comments about Chaucer's Canterbury Tales and the criticism that he had of the religious there. They're really good at preaching but never doing. This is Ophelia's observation. Yeah, don't lecture me. You're the one headed to Paris. And we all know that Paris is the city of love, right? So don't lecture me. It will be at this point that Laertes will say, oh, fear me not. In other words, no. I'll be a good boy in Paris, and you make sure that you don't mess around with Hamlet. Onto the stage will then come Polonius, the old man. And Polonius will kind of bounce onto the stage, and he will begin to give, this is darkly ironic, he will begin to give his final words of wisdom to his son, who is about to leave for Paris. Ironically, for many, many years in elementary school, these lines were required memorization for children. No kidding. They had to learn these because these are kind of like the code of behavior or whatever. Ironically, what Polonius says to his son, they're really good pieces of advice. What's even darkly more ironic, hyperbolic, is that, of course, Polonius is a fool and he's going to break every one of these at some point in the play, if he hasn't already. Notice what he says to him, though. My blessing with thee, he says, and these few precepts in thy memory, look thou character. In other words, I'm going to give you some words of wisdom. I need you to pay attention. Take a look at these real quickly. You'll see these possibly on the AR test. They often are understood to kind of be important truths of Polonius. Notice he says, give thy thoughts no tongue, nor any unproportioned thought his act. Can you put it in your own words? I'm teaching you how to read by virtue of reading this stuff. What does that mean? Don't always do what? Give thy thoughts no tongue, nor any unproportioned thought his act. Yeah, think before you speak, which is going to be darkly ironic given it's Polonius giving the advice. Be thou familiar, but by no means vulgar. What does that mean? What does that mean?
Be congenial, but don't be like...
Right. Don't think that everyone is your best friend. Remember when we were all in elementary school, you had a new best friend every day kind of thing? He says, yeah, this is not wise. Don't do that. Those friends thou hast, and their adoption tried, grappled into thy soul with hoops of steel. Whoa, what's he say about a good friend? If you are blessed enough to have one good friend in your life, you better take very good care of that one good friend. Grab hold with hoops of steel. Don't let go of a good friend, because obviously friends are hard to come by. Somebody you can really trust. No. He says, but do not dull thy palm with entertainment of each new hatched, unfledged comrade. Don't just believe someone just because he or she shows up and says, hey, I've got this great plan. This has been good advice, by the way, to young students who are about to leave to go off to college for the first time. No, we all do this. This is what you do when you're a freshman. How many people have been led into major mistakes from that line, right? Notice, beware of entrance to a quarrel, but being in it, bear it that the oppressed may beware of thee. Uh-oh, what's that say?
If you're going to fight someone, make sure you beat them up.
That's right. In other words, don't start a fight, but if you end up in a fight, you better walk away the winner of the fight. Right? In other words, somebody's going to get jacked and it better not be you kind of thing. But don't start fights. Give every man thy ear, but few thy voice. Oh, what's that mean? And darkly ironic, Polonius is the one speaking it. Yeah, listen, but don't do a lot of talking. Take each man's censure, that is to say their criticism, but reserve thy judgment. In other words, Don't take it to heart. Listen to what people have to say that's critical. This is an interesting one. Costly thy habit as thy purse can buy, but not expressed in fancy, rich, not gaudy. Anyone understand what this means?
Spend your money like wise.
In what regards, though? Costly thy habit as the purse can buy. See, some of you maybe don't know that the word habit means here. What do we mean?
It's time about garment.
Garment. Yes, that's right. So in other words, what's he saying about your clothes?
Make your clothes nice, but
Right. Don't overspend on your clothing, but buy the best that you can. Why? Look at the next line. For the apparel oft proclaims the man. Now that's an interesting line. What does that mean?
The way you're dressed.
Right. People judge you by the way you dress. And to that degree, make sure that you wear the best. Why? For they in France of the best rank and station are of the most select and generous chief in that. In other words, he says, you're going to Paris, know how to dress well. Don't show up looking like some kind of, kid from Denmark or whatever. You are going to show up in Paris, make sure you look good. Wear clothing that is within your budget, but the upper end of that of those garment selections. In other words, be aware of the fact that people define you by the way you present yourself, the way you look, the way you dress. By the way, do you think that's still true?
Yes.
Do people today still kind of define you by the way you dress? Do you think it matters at Worland High School the way you dress?
Yeah. Yes, it does.
Really? You think people kind of look at you and make decisions about the way you wear your hair, the way you wear your clothing, the garments that you decide on? Anderson looks at her clothes. You see, is this true or is this not true? You see, this is And another interesting question, do you have a sense that will shift in some ways as you leave and go on to university, college?
I think it's going to be like that wherever you go.
It'll be interesting to hear what you have to say about that one. Look at the next one. Neither a borrower, some of us need to write this one down and stamp it on our forehead. Neither a borrower, this will sound very Platonist, neither a borrower nor a lender be. What's that about?
Give money.
Don't get a credit card just because they can give you one. Yeah, don't borrow money. It is a dumb idea. Why? For loan oft loses both self and friend. Right? And borrowing dulls the edge of husbandry. In other words, don't loan money to your friends. Why? Because if they don't pay it back, it can be the end of the friendship. This above all, this is the dark irony of all ironies. This above all, to thine own self be true. And it follows as the night, the day, thou canst nothing be false to any man. What does he say? Whatever you do, this is the most important above all advice I can give to you. To thine own self be true. And it follows as the night, the day, thou canst not then be false to any man. What's it mean?
Be yourself.
Be yourself. Yes, be honest to yourself. This above all, be honest to yourself. Again, it's darkly ironic because Polonius is the big liar throughout the play. He's also the guy always breaking pretty much most of these rules, okay? Laertes is trying to get off stage because he wants to leave. He's kind of accustomed to his dad giving them these long lists of advice or whatever. And so he finally will leave. And the last thing that he says to Ophelia is, remember well what I've said to you. And she will say back, okay. And then Laertes will leave. Then Dad steps forward and says to Ophelia, what are you two talking about? And she says something touching the Lord Hamlet. And Ophelia's got to be played as a beautiful woman, but also very young and naive. She doesn't have a real good understanding of the world and especially of guys. And now it will fall to Daddy to give advice to daughter. And does this shock us? Now you've got a dad talking to his young daughter, and what is it that he says?
No boys.
Let's talk about Hamlet. You will not see him, you will not smell him, you will not touch him, you will not. This is the list. On and on it goes. He will say, you will tender me a fool if you end up messing around with Hamlet. Daddy will say it as well. Hamlet can't choose you for a wife. He can choose you for a lover, but he can't choose you for a wife because he's a prince. He doesn't have a choice. Stay away from him as it ends at the very end. Notice Ophelia will say at line 104, I do not know, Lord, what I should think. Now this resurrects one of the intriguing questions of this play, and it's this one. What is the relationship with Hamlet and Ophelia before the play begins? It's fairly clear that they're in conversation. It's also fairly clear they're probably in a little bit more than conversation. In other words, Dad has already heard some of this, and now he's ready to put a kibosh on it. And he will say to her, you will not see him again. You will not talk to him. You will not see him. You will not smell him, whatever. Notice that when he finishes, he says, I charge you, come your ways. And you have here the father saying to the daughter, no more. To which Ophelia will say, final line of 1:3, I shall obey my lord. Now this is really interesting, and it raises all kinds of interesting questions. She says, okay, to her dad. Okay, I'm not allowed to talk to Hamlet. Okay, I shall obey my lord. Which raises a really interesting question about the inflection in the voice, right? Jot down in your notes, how do you think it is that she will say this, I shall obey my lord? How would you say it? To McGee. Greetings. Greetings.
Hamlet's all over.
Oh, yes. Sure. Thank you. Go. Whitman. You got it.
No.
Thinker, Emerson, doer, Thoreau, and then, of course, radical poet Whitman. You bet. Okay. So, how do you think Ophelia speaks these words, I shall obey my lord, to her dad? Is she going to obey her dad? Or is she not going to obey her dad? Does she say, okay, and then turn around and do whatever she wants? Now, what about today? What are your thoughts on this? Do daughters say to fathers what fathers need to hear so they can then do whatever they want?
Just daughters?
Ophelia is going to obey her dad. Why does Ophelia obey her father? Do you understand anything about the time this play is set to be able to understand this? One of the questions of the play is going to be, where's Ophelia's mama? She doesn't have one. There seems to be a suggestion that maybe she might have died during giving birth to Ophelia. Laertes is the older, so Polonius has 2 children. And so she's pretty much alone in the world. She's governed by men. Men control her life, as would have been the case then. Well, you know this already from Romeo and Juliet. Remember, Juliet's mom will say to Juliet, you need to just think about Paris and just get married. Whose idea is it to do the Paris thing? Interestingly, it's kind of like mom's as much as it is dad's, because remember when Paris asks Lord Capulet, he's like, just let her get a little bit older and get to know her a little bit. So this arranged marriage thing is in the back of the mind of any young daughter of that time, especially anyone of nobility. So Ophelia has been told, this is what you will do, so she does it. She's like, okay, I will do it. And we're going to find out later she does do it. She completely ignores Hamlet in every way. Question, is it a good idea or a bad idea to obey your dad when your dad tells you what to do? If you are a daughter especially. Or should you be allowed to do your own thing? Or is it better to just say, okay, and then do whatever you want to do? That way the dad feels like, yes, I've told her what to do, she's obeying me. While at the same time, the daughter's able to do whatever she wants to do. What do you think on this one, Miss Katie? Should the daughter do exactly what the father tells her to do all the time?
I think it depends on your dad.
Which is to say what?
Like, they're kind of ignorant in what you're...
Fathers can't be ignorant by definition. They're men, and therefore they can't be... Oh, yeah. So you're saying dads can sometimes say stupid things to daughters.
Well, if you, like, not paying attention to what you're doing, then...
Is that good or bad for a dad to not pay attention?
For his sake or for yours?
It's good for his children. Man, I guess.
So, Miss Barney, if the father tells the daughter to do something, should the daughter do it simply out because the father is the father? Or must it make sense to the daughter? In other words, must she agree to obey? She must agree with the command for it to obey. She's got to agree. Ms. Kennedy, you agree? Yeah, the daughter, it's not a matter of whether the daughter is going to do it because the dad says so. It's a matter of whether the daughter thinks it's the right thing to do. You agree, Ms. Ramos? Of course, now we're back to, remember, our Plato discussion and the whole notion of your 13-year-old walking out the door and you're the father or the mother saying, of course, the shoe fits on the other foot in regards to moms as well. So the mom will say to the daughter, or the mom will say to the son, do X, and the son will say, okay. And the mom goes, whew, I feel so good that I've told him what to do. And he walks out the door and does the complete opposite. Do children have a moral obligation to obey their parents today? Do you think? Or should it be up to their choice? What do you think, Batson? Do children have a moral obligation to obey their parents? Right, whatever you say. Whatever the parent says, the child has to do it.
I don't think so.
I think there comes a certain age where you stop doing that.
Yeah.
Like when you do it after I just
Miss Damiano is saying another lock on the door would probably be in order.
He's got a lock on the outside
So,
and the inside.
what do you think about this idea, Miss Sindhu? Do you agree? There comes like an age. So in other words, their children obey their parents simply because they're told to until they get to a certain age, and then they have the freedom to choose to obey or not to obey?
They start like having like their own thoughts, and then like it like depends it depends on like what parent you respect more in certain situations. Cause like if my mom tried to tell me to go fix a car and like told me how to do it, like I wouldn't listen. But if my dad told me how to fix it,
You're going to do it.
then I would do it.
Because he has that expertise or whatever. What about in the relationship of guys and girls, though?
Just ignore both of them.
Oh! Mr. Schreiber says, moms and dads know nothing about guys and girls and therefore never listen to what they have to say.
definitely not.
Definitely not. So is it a function of parents kind of know that they're giving advice that probably isn't listened to anyway, but they give it anyway?
Well, I think it kind of ties back into the can you separate the message from the messenger too? Because if you have a parent that apparently hasn't had good things happen in a relationship,
Right.
never really got it right, and then they tell you what to do in a
Right.
relationship, you're gonna be like, no.
Right. You kind of get that sense with Laertes. He's telling his sister, I know boys. Let me tell you, I know guys. Guys are only out for one thing, stay away from Hamlet. Of course, it's a fair question for Ophelia to ask, really, you know guys. Why do you know guys? Are you one of those guys? It's a fair question, right, to ask Polonius. Really? All guys are out to wreck girls? You're a guy. Were you out to wreck girls? See how this works? So in other words, all of a sudden, Ophelia may begin to suspect the messenger. Have to think about that. She says, I will obey, my lord. And she does it. Let's go to 1415 real quickly. The 1415 scenes must be taken together. I don't have a lot of time to go into these scenes, but let's talk them through rather quickly. We will begin, first of all, by being told in the opening line of 1-4 that we are, again, in the nighttime. We are on the battlements. Looking kind of down from the top, Hamlet will see Claudius and Gertrude, his mother and stepfather, and they are partying. It's significant to point out that Claudius seems to almost always have a glass of wine in his hand in this play. Shakespeare's often making these statements against drinking, and one of the ways he does it is by showing foolish men doing foolish things by holding alcohol in their hand. In fact, that's this whole point of this dram of evil speech. A dram means drop. So a drop of evil for Hamlet is, he starts to muse with Horatio. You know what's interesting? You can have a pretty decent guy, and one small thing can screw it all up. Claudius, he is suggesting, has a drinking problem, and that's one of his major problems. Of course, the irony of all ironies is that Hamlet's about to get told, yeah, you think his drinking is his problem. He probably drinks now just so he can try to forget the fact that he slaughtered his own brother and married his brother's wife, which is kind of against almost every code you can find, including Hammurabi and, of course, the Mosaic Christian code. Hamlet will see his father, and he will say when he sees his dad at line 65, I do not set my life at a pin's fee And for my soul, what can it do to that being a thing immortal as itself? As they say to Hamlet, don't follow this ghost. It could tempt you to the edge of the cliff, and you could fall over, or it might drive you to, and that key word gets used for the first time, madness. This is a play of madness. One of the reasons why, if you go into psychology, you will study this play, is because Shakespeare was very interested in the idea of insanity. Very interested. One of the classic stories from my own youth of this is that I, at one point in my life, attended a high school that was a part of a private university. And I was in a private high school and part of the private university. And this university was known to have an outstanding football program. And they had a freshman running back. And Reggie had broken all kinds of records in his freshman year. And there was a lot of excitement about him coming back for his sophomore year. They had two-a-days, this was in Texas, they had two-a-days in the heat of early August, and everyone showed up for two-a-days, and Reggie showed up, and he came to the first day of practice, and he walks out onto the field, and he doesn't have his shoes on. And everybody's kind of like, Reg, dude, where's your shoes? And he does this, he kind of looks down, and then he looks up, and he goes, oh yeah, my shoes. And they're all like, dude, are you like stoned or something? And he turns around and he walks back to the locker room, and Reg isn't back for 30 minutes. Coach sends somebody in. Reg is sitting in the locker room talking to himself. No shoes. Reggie's lost his mind. He's gone nuts. As in, they had to help him find his way to a special home for the rest of his life. Reg lost his mind. Now, Shakespeare is very interested in this notion of, quote unquote, losing your mind. Going insane. What is that like? And he's going to play that game in a number of his plays, but he's going to play that game to the ultimate in the play Hamlet, where he's going to actually have Hamlet pretending like he's mad. We call this an antic disposition. And the question will be in the play, is Hamlet actually losing his mind? We'll have more to say about this in a moment. Of course, we also will have this line about something is rotten in the state of Denmark, which we kind of understand to be, yeah, that's probably true. And again, we're back to this garden theme of rottenness. Things, remember, he said in 1:3, things rank and gross in nature possess it merely. Remember, he was talking about the world being an unweeded garden. 1:5. Now, we'll move on to 1:5. 1:5 is the elongated, some students will say, why so long, conversation between Hamlet's ghost, the father, and Hamlet himself. Here we will hear several things right away. Notice the opening line of 5:1. Hamlet will ask, whither wilt thou lead me? Of course, he's speaking literally, but we understand this as well in metaphoric ways to be like, what is it that I'm going to be asked to do? And of course, we're about to find out he's going to be asked to do something really, really horrific. Next, we are told the ghost will say at roughly lines 7-8 that he wants for Hamlet to get revenge. If I'm teaching this play to 7th graders, that's pretty much where I start. I will say this is a play about revenge. Hamlet's daddy's been murdered, and Hamlet's daddy wants Hamlet to get revenge. Right? So for the first time, we're going to hear this word. There will be then, again at line 25, revenge, the foul and most unnatural murder. Why is it an unnatural murder? Do you have any sense of that? What makes it unnatural? It's his brother, right. It's the sin of Cain killing Abel. We're back to the Genesis account for those of you who are unfamiliar with that, right? And we're told how it happens, right? Notice he will say, it's told that a serpent stung me, but notice that the serpent that did sting thy father's life now wears the crown. It's a great word picture, right, of a snake wearing the crown, and that's Claudius. From this point on, by the way, the audience will see Claudius totally different with that word picture, and they'll see him kind of serpentine-like, and he is kind of slinky, and he's good at using language to get what he wants, Claudius, and the rest of it. Notice Hamlet will say, "Oh, my prophetic soul." In other words, I knew it. I knew I didn't like that SOB of an uncle. Now I got a good reason to really not like that guy. That kind of thing, right? He will call him incestuous, which will take us back to Hamlet's 1:3 observation about incestuous sheets with such dexterity to incestuous sheets. An adulterate, and this will raise one of the questions because notice he will say, Hamlet the father, the ghost will say, my most seeming, virtuous queen. And again, we're not even through the first act, and some of you will begin to say, whoa, 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 that was what the queen said. Why does it seem so particular with you? Remember? And he comes back to his mom and says, seems? Whoa, 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 not seems. It is. And here, notice the ghost will call his mother seeming virtuous queen. That is to say, she is not what she appears, which begs a really intriguing question, and it's going to begin to set up the conflict for Hamlet. What about his mama?
Was she?
Yeah. Was she having it off with his uncle before? So then that all of a sudden means she's implicated in the murder in some way. Does she know? Does she not know? This will become one of the central puzzles for Hamlet as well. He's got to figure that one out. Notice that we're told this thing about pouring poison in the ear is the way that he goes, and of life, of crown, of queen at once dispatched. In other words, I lost everything and I couldn't get any last rites, which is why, final unction, which is why I'm walking around the world still, Notice he says, oh, horrible, horrible, horrible. If thou hast, I'm at line 80, 81 roughly, if thou hast nature in thee, bear it not. Whoa, what does that mean? Do you have any sense what that means? If you have nature in you, bear it not. Don't be a nice guy. That's what he tells his son. Don't be a nice guy. We're going to find out that Hamlet is kind of known to be a nice guy. He's a nice kid. He's a poet. He's an intellectual. He's a lover. He's in love with Ophelia. We're going to find that he really is in love with Ophelia. But notice, Daddy will say, all of that goes away. And he says, let not the royal bed of Denmark be a couch for luxury and damned incest. In other words, I got a project for you, and this is what it is. You're going to have to jack your uncle, as in revenge the murder. Notice he will finish by saying, remember me, and then he leaves. And then Hamlet will say, yeah, I'm going to remember you. Look what he says. He comes back to the soliloquy of 1-3. It's like he can't finish his lines again. And he calls his head a distracted globe. The word distracted can mean going crazy or mad. Remember thee, he says, yea, from my table of memory I'll wipe away all trivial fond records, all saws of books. He says, I'm going to wipe my mind clean of anything that I focused on before, and thy commandment all alone shall live within the book and volume of my brain. The only thing I'll focus on will be this task now. I've been given this task. Of course, immediately he's got a problem. His buddies show up. What is the problem? Let's put it. This is one of the major themes of the play, and it becomes one of the major themes of all of Shakespeare's tragedies. How does Shakespeare say it in Macbeth? There is no art to find the mind's construction in the face. What does that mean? There is no art to find the mind's construction in the face. You cannot tell by looking at a person's face what's going on in his mind. How does that have any relationship to Horatio showing up? Horatio shows up and he says, dude, what was the ghost? What did the ghost say? And immediately Hamlet says, no, I'm not going to tell you, you will tell it. What's Hamlet's problem?
His face shows what he's
Yeah, but what's Hamlet's bigger problem? Who will he trust? I mean, think about it. Who will he trust? He has now been told by his father's ghost that his father was murdered by the present king of Denmark, and that his mother is messing around with his dad, possibly even before the murder itself. So now all of a sudden, Hamlet's got to ask this question, who will I trust? And how will I know if I can trust someone? He makes them swear. Horatio's like, this is strange. Hamlet will say, there are more things in earth and heaven than are dreamt of in your philosophy. In other words, not everything in life is contained in books. There's some stuff that's just seriously strange, and this is one of those things. Swear. And so they all swear that no matter how Hamlet behaves, they will never fold their arms and say, well, yeah, he's acting kind of nuts, but I know something you don't know. Hamlet makes them swear they're not going to say that. And then finally, the final lines, look at them and maybe write them in your notes. O cursed spite, that ever I was born to set it right. He will begin those lines, the final lines of the first act, by saying the time is out of joint. In other words, this is the problem for Hamlet. He's stuck in a moment he can't get out of. And for him, that's a really sad, terrible place to be. Come back and we'll work with Hamlet 2 tomorrow.